We'll call this meeting to order at, 6:32. First item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, next up is correspondence, visitors, and public comments. As we've been doing the last meetings, we will continue with our same structure for public comments. We'll allow 3 minutes per person. I'll let you know when there's 10 seconds left, or I'll do 20 seconds left to wrap, so you can get a chance to wrap up, make a conclusion. We'll start with the people that are at Swanton first, and then I'll see if anybody wants to speak that's online. So first up on my speaker list is Tammy Underwood from Swanton.
Okay, first I'm just going to make a couple of comments from a FOIA letter that was filed with the CDC by a lady that was asking a couple of questions about the mandates and the masking. She asked 2 questions. The first was, why was HHS now linked to the CDC and when did it happen? She was not given an answer on that. Her second question was, does the CDC continues to claim that masks stop the spread of the virus. Can you please share their science? Do they have a randomized controlled trial proving that cloth face masks stop the spread of a virus? And does the CDC have a randomized controlled trial that 2 masks stop the spread of a virus or COVID-19? The CDC's response was, the CDC is not aware of any randomized controlled trials that show that masks or double masks or cloth face coverings are effective against COVID-19. Once again, they do not work. And that's coming from the horse's mouth. The CDC also has a section called Similarities and Differences Between Flu and COVID-19, and it states that both viruses spread the same way, but that SARS is more contagious. So to go back to the masks, they said disposable masks are loose-fitting devices that were designed to be worn by medical personnel to protect accidental contamination of patient wounds and to protect the wearer against splashes of bodily fluids. Our systematic review found no significant effect of face masks on transmission of laboratory-confirmed influenza. So that means it doesn't stop COVID either, because they just got done saying that SARS and the flu were spread the same way. Now I want to go to the Educational Opportunity Act. The right to public education is integral to Vermont's constitutional form of government and its guarantees of political and civil rights. Vermont students must be afforded substantially equal access to quality basic education. It is the policy of the state that all Vermont children will be afforded educational opportunities which are substantially equal, although programs may vary. You have deprived my son of that very right through your illegal mask mandate. Education for children requires an unwritten, mutually understood contract on the part of the parents and the school. My husband and I have fulfilled our part of that contract by paying our taxes, which helps fund his education. The school, however, has breached their part of the contract when they would not provide his education for wearing a harmful, illegal mask. And my husband and I have talked to people about this, and we haven't quite decided what we're going to do with it yet, but we're not done with it. The school shall, through a process including parents, teachers, and community members, develop and implement a comprehensive action plan to improve student performance.
Excuse me,
you do not include parents in anything, and you also didn't include us when you decided to institute social emotional.
I apologize, but time is up. So next up on our speaker list is Caleb Underwood from Swanton.
I'm going to give my time up.
To me.
What was that?
He's giving his minutes to me. the rest of this in an email to the board, but one of the things that I want to start getting some answers on is apparently social emotional learning was embedded in the curriculum back in 2020. And there is an article where everybody involved was so proud that Swanton was the first in the state to implement this. What a thing to hang your hat on. I want to know why myself, and so far, every parent I've talked to had no idea what it was, never got anything prior to this being implemented so that we could have input. And according to Act 60, we are supposed to be included in some of these decisions. Our taxes pay for our kids to go to this public school. We have a right to know what they're being taught, and we have a right to have input on what they're being taught. And from what I've seen so far, this is a bunch of crap. And it's nothing but trying to get in our kids' heads and manipulate them. And that is wrong. Some of the things that you're talking about in this program, or whatever you want to call it, has to do with values and morals and things that should be instituted at home and surveilled by the parents, not the school. You need to stay in your lane and teach our kids, not get in their heads and say, well, how are you feeling today? Well, you know, it's okay if your parents don't agree with you. You don't have to agree with them. You can come here and we'll tell you what to think and how to think. You guys need to stop that. I'm going to be looking at this program a little bit more because I haven't had a lot of time to do a deep dive into it, but it is a bunch of crap. And I want to know why, and I'll put it in an email, why parents weren't told about it before it was implemented back in 2020, and why you think it's such a good idea. And if you thought it was such a good idea, why didn't you inform the parents or ask their opinions or let them know that you were going to do it? Because I've talked to enough people now that don't even know that you're doing it. And that is wrong.
Thank you. Next up is Steve Martel.
Good evening. Many on this board have said that you need to defer to the judgment of the so-called health experts and their guidance. I'm sure you think these health experts follow the science and would keep data on all aspects of COVID infections, hospitalizations, deaths, and recovery. But the plain truth is that this is a big lie. These experts are only pushing data to entice people to take the vaccine. Wouldn't you want to know the data on people who have already had COVID and what the chances are of them having the virus again? Wouldn't that be something that our premier organization, the Center for Disease Control, would have data on? Well, the answer to that is that would be a big no. The revelation that the CDC does not collect data on people who have acquired natural immunity to the virus raises questions about vaccine mandates, specifically how the government or employers can mandate vaccines for people who may not need them and who could be at a greater than average risk of experiencing an adverse reaction to the shots. Every single peer-reviewed study has found that the naturally immune have far greater than 99% protection from having COVID, and this immunity does not wane. So do not tell me that these are health experts. They are not. They are government-appointed hacks who go back and forth from the private sector, pharmaceutical companies to government health agencies. Our very own Commissioner of Vermont Department of Health, Mark Levine, and a couple of his associates who demanded the closure of Burlington High School because of high PCB levels in the air have been proven to be a sham and a lie. Levels of PCB are consistent with many other schools and are really quite normal and acceptable levels. But everyone, once again, just blindly followed the health experts. Now families know the PCB contamination in most of the buildings is below the state's new school action level of 100 nanograms per cubic meter. State officials, including Health Commissioner Mark Levine and state toxicologist Sarah Voigt, for months stood by the notion that 15 nanograms per cubic meter is dangerous. They now conclude it's common to find that amount of PCBs in any indoor air environment which means most schools would have exceeded the previous recommendation and therefore required pricey fixes. They held one school in the nation to a standard that they created on their own. They introduced all this anxiety, fear, disruption into people's lives, effectively over nothing. Mark Levine and Sarah Voy should resign, and you as a board should demand their resignations. Now we have a big push for booster shots. Why? Because the vaccinated are catching COVID and being hospitalized. These booster shots will be never ending. It is time for this board to do their own research, especially with doctors and scientists that are heavily tied to the federal, state government, or pharmaceutical purse strings, and make your own informed decisions, because you can't rely on the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up is Kelly Granville of P.E.G.
As the school board knows, the support staff at MVU has been involved in the grievance regarding IAs, instructional assistants, being given students who have behavioral interventionist plans. Those plans are not being implemented because the IAs who are being forced to do the work are not trained for it. We have BIs, we don't have enough. Those BIs are being given students who belong on the NCSS CAT workers, who are more highly trained than our BIs, who are very highly trained but not as involved. And those BIs are physically being abused by their students because they're that physically violent. All this was put in the grievance, and in some magical way, the superintendent was able to sway our union president to agree with her response to that, although our union president knew that none of the IAs and BIs named in the grievance had agreed to it, had in fact, the day it came out, had summarily and unanimously rejected it, and in fact refused to sign the new contracts because they're not what they're asked for. So that's the way you want to behave, with no honor and no willingness to listen to the problems of your employees, then you're going to get the loyalty that you deserve, which is none. So this is kind of going out to the parents. When MVU asks you to come in because there's a change to an IEP on your student, and we've had one that's been changed 3 times since school began, not because the student's learning abilities have changed or the needs of that student has changed, but it's simply driven by who's available to work with that student. So it's a cover your ass IEP. It's not something that's benefiting the students. So parents, I encourage you, contact the board and say, cut it out. I want the help for my student that he or she needs, and if you don't have the people to do it, then you need to hire them. So put these jobs up on School Spring. I've looked, they're not there. The only sign that I've seen is for substitutes, which is not what MVU needs. I had something that one of our IAs asked me to read to you.
15 seconds.
I will not be able to attend, but if you want to let the board know that while everyone knows about our problem, nothing to date has been offered to us except the new contract. I would like to see an offer to help me with maybe some BI techniques, or have the special educator get involved with my student outside the little time she spends with her on B days. Even my teachers are having a hard time getting anything from her. Nothing has been done to help me or have accommodations made for this student. I am not qualified to do this. So I just want to end with that person that you took for granted today could be the only one person that you'll need tomorrow. And I'm not going to be there for you.
It was all that COVID money. Hire some people.
Thank you. And there's a whole line for COVID money to especially help special ed.
Okay.
That's okay. We're gonna find out where that COVID money
In
is.
attendance in Swanton. Next, is there anybody online that would like to speak? Seeing no hands, that concludes our public comments. And we'll move on to agenda review. I have no adjustments. I don't know about Julie.
No, I do not.
Okay. So moving on, we move to consent agenda. And at this time, I'd entertain a motion to accept the meeting minutes from November 16th.
Chris,
Don.
I don't have it in front of me now, but in reading the minutes, we had a very fine presentation by the after-school program lady. And at the end of that, I commended her for the efforts that she's made to provide leadership during this time of the pandemic. And that statement, my statement of commendation, never appeared in the minutes. I'd like to work with whomever's writing the minutes now to get that inserted because I think it's critical. She's new, she's done a fantastic job. And we've had, as you know, many challenges during her first year on the job.
Okay. Any other adjustments? Actually, first, can I get a first on that motion?
I'll make that.
Don's a first. Terry's the second. Any discussion on top of what Don stated? Seeing none, all those in favor of accepting the meeting minutes from November 16th as adjusted, signify by raising your hand. Nay. Anybody against? And abstentions. Motion carries 7-0-1. I abstained. I wasn't at the last meeting. Okay, moving on to reports, administrative reports. First up is MVU administration. Jay, Dan, or I guess Jay or Dan.
Yeah, I'll take the report. And Jay, if there's anything else you want to add, by all means, feel free to chime in afterwards. Tonight is actually senior financial aid night up at MVU. It started at 5:30 tonight. Parents could get some help filling out their FAFSA form, getting questions answered about college application process, and learning more about obtaining Vermont grants for their kids. If they have any questions about that, if any parents want to reach out, they can reach out to the head of guidance, Tyler Miggs, and she'd be happy to answer any questions that people have about that. We are proud to say that the science fair is going to be happening this year. It'll be on January 13th in Commons. And Rich Ballard has sent an email out to all students about that. So if they have any questions, they can certainly reach out to Mr. Ballard about that. We are pleased to announce that we are doing Operation Happiness this year. We are collecting non-perishable food items and canned goods between now and December 9th. And we will have MC Transport help us get those items down to the Swanton Municipal Building for sorting and distribution to needy families, most likely on the 10th. So if anybody has any, feel free to drop them off at MVU or right down at the municipal complex. We are proud to announce that on November 18th and 19th, we had a sense of normalcy back at MVU with Skit Night. Approximately over 120 high school students participated in the event, which was great. It was just great to have the noise back in the building and that, real camaraderie. So it was great to have. And I'll put a little plug in for the sophomores who, despite not doing it last year and having a brand new advisor who's never been through the process, they took home the trophy. So congratulations to them. On the evenings of November 3rd and 4th, we held parent-teacher conferences. People could attend both in person and virtually. I know a lot of the middle school teams had their times booked up the entire evening, and a lot of high school parents as well. So this may be a model that we go to back in the future, just giving parents both the option of being able to attend in person and virtually. Yesterday, we had some professional learning for our English Language Arts department in grades 7 and 8. They spent some time planning the instructional materials and assessments to support their newly updated curriculum. One of the last things we have, New England Air has returned to, they had another job to do, rather large job to do towards October and into early November. They did come back into the building November. They were in APOD for quite some time, and it was taking a long time for them to complete this one job. where 2 air handlers were being installed in one location. As a result, I mean, there were wires out. We had to kind of quarantine off that whole block of a hallway. So we've asked them to try and squeeze things back in over the Christmas break. So we're not going to have them try and do it now and work around students, especially where there's 2 units. So we're just going to have them try to come back in and squeeze it in during the December break. And some upcoming events, and there's also a link to the December family newsletter in there. So any questions, Jay? Anything I missed?
Dan?
Thank you, Dan. Any questions for MVU?
Is the FFA doing any Christmas wreaths and trees this year, or the ag program?
So the MVU yearbook does the wreath, and Carol Hickey was in charge of that. And those wreaths just came in last Friday, I want to say, or maybe Monday. So they were just recently in. The FFA was looking to do some poinsettia sales. Jay, do you know if they're going to be doing those, or the fruit?
Neither the citrus nor the poinsettias are going to happen this year. And again, a lot of it has to do with the ability of getting the materials here. It's just a terrible year to get anything, especially if you want it on time.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for MVU administration? Oh, Toby.
So I was lucky enough to attend skit night on the Friday night, and just kudos to everybody. I think it was a great night. I did have a couple adults come up to me, and the mask compliance was, from what I saw, was very, very good, but it got me thinking with the winter months coming and indoor sporting events. And I actually don't need to hear the plan now, but I'm hoping there's a plan for dealing with non-compliant adults in particular. I know that's difficult, but if it's the rule, it's the rule. And, you know, it was funny that the parents who I heard from were probably personally opposed to the rule, but they were wearing masks, and they saw people that weren't in compliance, and it bothered them. So I don't know what the solution is, but the indoor season is upon us, and we're having more and more events indoors. And as we know, numbers are increasing. So I wanted just to put that out there. I'm one board member, but I would fully support the administration in whatever they think is appropriate in dealing with that issue. This board has decided to follow the guidance. So, you know, and we've tasked the administration with doing that. That's the expectation. So that's all I need to say about that. I just, there are people who are concerned, who are opposed to it, but comply, and they see people who aren't in compliance, and it's really bothersome to them. And frankly, I guess I can understand that. So.
Absolutely. I know that John Lumpson's going to be talking in a few minutes, Toby, and he may be able to address some of what the expectations are for the winter indoor sports season.
Thank you, Dan and Jay. Is there any more questions from you? Hearing and seeing none. I don't believe there's any in Swanton. So hearing and seeing none, thank you very much. And as Dan said, the next up is the athletic director report, and John Lumpson.
Thank you, Chris. I can answer that question there in a minute, Toby. But I'll just quickly go over some highlights of the fall 2021 season. There were 281 student athletes that participated on 16 middle and high school teams. And this compares to 236 a year ago. So this is an increase of about 45 student athletes. And I'm sure for many of them and many of our community, it was the getting back to normal routine. So it was good to see that our numbers did increase in our fall sports. There were several girls who were interested in playing golf last year or this past year. If you remember that golf, the sport last year, that for the girls' side anyway, that there were no girls that did sign up. So this year we had two. Gary LaShore, the boys golf coach, was able to put them on part of his team and coach the girls and also attend some of their matches as well. So thank you, Gary LaShore, for doing that. This year, our girls volleyball team played a competitive schedule and did very well. And I'm looking forward to having this team participate at the varsity level next fall. The following events were back this fall. I was able to organize a girls and boys soccer jamboree at J.P.E.G. With 12 soccer teams from around our area. And also this year I was able to coordinate a 4-team field hockey jamboree at J.P.E.G. We had great weather, and it was a great way to start off the season. Also, what else came back was homecoming, was something that we missed a year ago. So homecoming was back, and that also included a celebration with a parade, dance, and fireworks. The annual Powder Puff game with BFA was played, and whether you know this or not, but over $30,000 was raised between the two schools for Camp Tecumseh and to the Jim Bashaw Foundation. To start the season, all fall coaches attended the meeting with myself and Rick Farnham on Tuesday, August 10th, and topics of discussion were safety protocols, coaching beyond the X's and O's, team culture, measuring success, and our suits health and safety. Our NVAC, which is the Northern Vermont Athletic Conference Cross Country Championships, were held here at Missisquoi on Saturday, October 16th. There were from 17 high schools from around Northern Vermont and over 440 runners that participated. Big thank you to Ken Sanamore, the MVU cross country coaching staff, and parents for making this a successful event. The race was also live streamed for people who did not want to attend, and that was done by Northwest Access. Recapping the varsity teams, the girls soccer team hosted their second consecutive playoff game here at MVU. Our boys soccer team won their playdown game at Linden. However, they lost to the runner-up finalist Harwood. Our field hockey team lost to Linden in a quarterfinal game. Our football team did not qualify for playoffs. Our cross-country team did participate in states, and there was one runner who qualified for the Meet of Champion race that was held in St. Albans. Many of our athletes were selected to the all-league selections, as well as being recognized by the local media in our newspapers as Athletes of the Week. I also, in the report that I sent to Perrette, talked about the athletic training report of daily treatments that our athletic trainer did, a number of parent phone calls, evaluations, injuries, and so on. Also, I am currently working with a company regarding the track and field equipment, and I have more details about that at the task force meeting, I think sometime next week. Dan Palmer and I took 8 student athletes to the VSADA Leadership Conference in Burlington in early November. And Rick Farnham and I continued to meet with many of our student athletes during our Leadership Council meetings. The middle and high school winter seasons is upon us, as Toby talked about. It started this week with some practices, and we got some scrimmages coming up here in the next couple of days, as well as next week. And games start late next week. The winter sports include basketball, boys and girls hockey, dance, cheerleading, and indoor track is back after a 1-year absence, as we did not have this last year because of COVID. The MVU winter guidelines, practice, and game schedules are all posted on the MVU athletic website. To Toby, to go to your question and concern, we will be making an announcement prior to games that we are asking that whether you're vaccinated or not, that all spectators be in a mask and worn properly. If that were to not happen, I would personally ask them to put their mask up. If I ended up seeing it another time not wearing it correctly, we would have a removal of that spectator. Someone mentioned, I think maybe in the last board, about coaching requirements. So I just want to quickly go over that. For a middle school coach here at Missisquoi, we asked that, well, some of the rules that we have, that a middle school coach must have their concussion certification done every 2 years, along with their AED and CPR training every 2 years. And also starting new this past winter, there's a course on the NFHS website. It's called Implicit Bias, and it's a course that all coaches have to take starting this winter. As a high school coach, there are a few more courses that they must take, the concussion course, the AED training every 2 years, but also there's a fundamentals of coaching course. It's a 6 to 7 hour course that coaches must take. And they also must take a first aid, health, and safety course, which is a 2 or 3 hour course done online for any of those coaches who want to participate. That's my report. I'll be here to answer any questions or concerns that anyone might have.
Thank you, John. Is there any questions for John? Toby.
So, John, I thought the cross-country meet was great. Thank you for that. I got to catch it on Northwest, and I know Ken Sandamore helped, but also frequent meeting person Steve Martel actually did the announcing. I thought it was great. So thank you to Steve too. I thought it was great watching him announce and helping out the sports program. Do we have any update on athletic trainer for us?
Yes, we have hired an athletic trainer, and she starts this coming Wednesday, December 8th. And actually,
Okay,
she'll
great.
be here tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock to do another walkthrough with me.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Hey, Don.
Chris, you mentioned here at the end of your report the different requirements that coaches at various levels have to participate in. How do you confirm or validate that they have done that successfully?
I don't think anyone can see me. I have stacked on about a ½ inch in paperwork. They have to send me a certificate, and from there I have to put this in a BPA database where it is monitored every month by another athletic director that our coaches are up to date and are certified.
Thank you. And I guess the one thing maybe it never got to you, but at a previous meeting, there was discussion with administration about the incident that gave us quite a bit of unfavorable publicity. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, but I think you're well aware of what I'm talking about.
Yes, I do, Don, and Jay and I are working with our teams starting early next week, and we'll be visiting them during that time, and sort of a large group going team to team, or at least program to program. Talk about how we can change things here at Missisquoi.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions for John and the athletic program? Seeing none, thank you very much, John. Appreciate
Thank you, Chris. I'm actually headed to the rink to go see a boys hockey parent meeting. So that's where I'm headed. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, John. Have a good night.
You too.
Okay, on to new business. And first up under new business is the budget input survey results.
Here, I was muted. Imagine that. Let me see if I can make this work better. Are you seeing the exchange summary?
We are seeing a beautiful view of something.
That's not what we want to happen. So I'm going to try that again. There it is.
Yeah, not quite as beautiful, Julie, but it'll do.
You're
I was
saying,
gonna say, it's what you wanted, not nearly as beautiful though.
okay. So last year we did a board input survey to staff, to parents, and to the community. We did just a Google survey, and the board found that really helpful. This year we used the thought exchange that we have for that purpose. And we asked some survey questions, some sort of yes, no kinds of questions, but we also asked what people's thoughts were around the most important things that the district should consider in the development of our school budget for next year. So, and I just want to start by saying that a version of this, it's sort of an interactive link. We'll put that on our website so people can see anytime the thoughts that were shared in an overview of that. So 248 participants took place in this survey, which is probably twice what happened last time. And almost 300 thoughts were shared and just under 7,000 ratings happened. So for those of you who haven't done it, you answer some questions, you share a thought or two, and then you see what other people think and you rate how much you agree with those thoughts that others are sharing. So first we asked, what's your relationship to the school district? And you could pick, I'm a parent and a community member, or you could pick a number of things, but we essentially had a number of parents, we had community members without children in school, and we had employees of the district, and then we had some folks that chose other. You can see the breakdown of the responses. While there were some folks from out of the community, not in this presentation, but when I look at the data individually, you can filter out people who weren't from this town or filter out employees and just look at parents and things like that. And I think that the overall is a representation of all of the responses. This is a different kind of chart that puts all of the survey answers sort of together in a way that you can see on one page. The first question really was, in setting priorities for the district, how important would you rate recruiting and retaining high quality staff? You can see here that the yes, the colors are wrong. Oh my goodness. I'm going to skip that. But it was over 80% said yes to that question. And no was not even an answer that was registered. Most people found it to be, another 40% found it important. So it was almost, I think it was 97% said it's essential or important to have high quality teachers in our school. Technology was rated as about 74% found it essential or important. Unified arts, expanding unified arts opportunity, almost 90%, 80% found it essential to important. Oops. I'm sorry. This computer's too sensitive. The importance of providing supports for students' social emotional learning needs. 48% said it's essential, 31% said it's important. How would you rate the importance of enhancing interventions for students struggling academically? It was 57% say essential and 32% important. How would you rate the importance of after-school programming? 24%, 19% said it's essential and 39% said important. How would you rate the importance of safe and well-maintained school facilities? 52% said essential and 41% said important. The last survey question we had was, due to the influx of federal funding to the district, and a projected surplus for the FY22. It's resulted in a projected surplus. Would you support reserving a portion of that surplus to address capital projects in our schools? 61% said yes, 5% said no, and about 39% said not sure, they'd need more information. You can sort of see a word cloud of the important thoughts that were shared most commonly in this thought exchange. You see a lot of words about recruiting employees, competitive wages and salaries, and tying that to the learning and health of students. Some of the top thoughts, and by that they mean what are the ones that were rated the highest by the most people? Having high quality teachers and staff, raising wages and salaries for employees to retain the ones we have and attracting more. Retaining and maintaining quality staff, kind, qualified, and happy staff are vital for the safety and quality of learning for our children. When you look at the themes that came out of the survey, and this is the first chart I have here, is how many times something was mentioned, the total number of thoughts. So by far, the most thoughts that were shared were about raising wages and retaining high quality staff. There were many that talked about engaging programs for students. And it was about having more learning opportunities, wider variety of learning options for kids. This pink one that says that is unthemed. So those are things that sort of, they don't fall into, they're thoughts that people shared, but they don't fall under a category. Investing in facilities, supports for supervision and behavior management. So supports in schools for the behavior management, because behavior management is a big issue in schools right now, all over Vermont, all over the country. Improving curriculum and instruction, mental health and social emotional services for students. You can see where keep spending down, taxes, we don't want taxes to be high, was shared, professional development, and then equipment and supplies. So you can really see that most people are talking about wages and many fewer people are talking about equipment and supplies. When you look at the thoughts in terms of how highly rated they were, the degree to which the people, the 250 people agreed to these thoughts, the highest area of agreement was in raising wages and professional development, additional music and art, equipment and supplies. People didn't say no to it. They thought it was important. It just wasn't mentioned as often. Curriculum and instruction, mental health and services, engaging programming, supports for behavior, the unthemed ones, and then investing in improving. So even our lowest really rated things fell into an over 3 in terms of agreement. But the highest rated thoughts were in this area. Some samples, again, professional development thoughts that were shared. Training and retaining teachers important. Training paras and paying them more important. Support and BIs need additional training. Nobody disagrees with those statements. Additional music in the arts. Our children need creative outlets. Support and nourish the arts. You can see them for yourselves. Providing equipment and supplies for every child in every subject. Teachers shouldn't have to use their own funds to supply students. Whenever we hear about that, we always ask, why are you doing that? You just need to ask, because that's a thing that shouldn't be happening right now. But we want to make sure that teachers have what they need to teach the students in front of them. Improved curriculum instruction. Here are a couple of the top rated thoughts in that area. What matters most and prepares them for their future beyond our walls. I think that's so well said. making sure we have the staff to take care of the emotional and mental well-being of our students, increasing the supports.
Julie, the little numbers in quotations, is that a percentage of the
No, it's numbers of people
number of people out of 250?
that agree, that rated it. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
I will say the word incorrect. It's a Devin could probably tell you the kind of average that they do. It's a mathematical, it's not a straight mathematical average. Employee retention and maintenance of buildings. Here were some of the top thoughts here. That's overall the results. I have this PowerPoint for the board. And then, as I said, there's an interactive report that will go on the website where you can go through and you can click on the bar graphs and you can see what the thoughts are in that theme. And then there's a listing of all of the thoughts and what they were rated. So people can see all of it.
Julie, we have a question in Swanton.
Absolutely.
Julie, Chelsea Lumbra, just wondering, because a whole host of us took that survey and we recall reading through, I'm just wondering if you can share what section all of the COVID protocols, mask protocols, concerns around how that's affecting the kids and what section that was included in, because I know those comments were there. Just wondering what section that could be found for folks to peruse.
Let's see. Some of them might be in unthemed.
Oh, okay.
And some don't get clustered into themes because they're not related to the question. But I think most of them would be in unthemed, Chelsea.
Okay, thank you.
The only questions that get, I just want to be transparent, the only questions that get deleted are if somebody says something about an individual or something that's the computer flags it. But other thoughts would be in there.
Chris?
Don?
I think this information is good. I think we should keep doing it. I guess I have to be honest with you, I'm a little disappointed that we're still pretty light on community members, very light on community members.
Yep.
And light on parents. And you know, I'm not going to spend some time tonight. I may ask you at some later time, or Bonnie or somebody, but you know, we've talked about salaries and benefits. We know it's important. But if over half the people work for us, I'm not surprised.
Well, Don, to answer that question, because I wanted to check that. When I filter out employees of the school district and just look at parents and community members, you still see the same spread of importance. But yes, I did send it to all of the select boards too, and encourage them to send it to anyone who would be interested in filling it out.
Another year, if I'm still on the board, I would be interested in going to the village trustees and the select board members and asking them to put it on their agenda. Because I think that my biggest point is not so much the results, but to get more people engaged.
Exactly. Exactly.
Thank you.
We have another question at central office. I mean, Swanton, sorry.
Okay, just sort of along those lines, I wonder what the plan is for a little bit of more community engagement in terms of, I mean, 248 responses out of however, what is it, 1,800 students is pretty weak. Just wondering if there's a thought around how to improve that engagement. And there are some folks here who are very engaged members of the community who would probably be happy to share with you some thoughts around how to get your community engaged. And one of them I think could probably be a recurring theme is
listening, follow through, and some sort of action. And I think that in a lot of these areas, as we're seeing, there's comments, questions, concerns, and then nothing. And so some of your community may feel like, what's the point? And I've heard that a number of times.
Is there any more questions for the input survey results or comments? Seeing none, thank you, Julie. We'll move on to next item under new business, which is FY23 budget draft 3.
Okay, so hard to believe we're already on draft 3, but here we are. So as you know, draft 1 included mostly or primarily salary and benefit increases. Draft 2, we looked at a lot of the projected contracted increases to things like transportation and other purchase services. And now draft 2 comes to you after Julie and I had wonderful meetings, I thought, with principals in each building. It was great for me to be back in the building for at least for one little visit. Even though it took time out of their very busy schedules. I really appreciate having that conversation with them. I think we had great conversation about the needs that they have and how we can support those financially. And so it was Julie, myself, and each building principal for over probably an hour with each one, which was great. We did talk about position needs or adjustments or reconfigurations that they may have, but most of those are already being met. Or utilizing ESSER funds to meet those needs this year. And so we've talked about how to be strategic and position our schools best with our ESSER funding around those positions to keep that support, but avoid any kind of cliff or fiscal cliff as we see those funds sunset. And so we talked a lot about reallocating funds and looking for other resources and looking for reconfigurations and thinking along those lines rather than adding positions, which is always the conversation that we seem to be having, which is great. This draft does include basically every true position. So it might not include, someone who's tutoring just for a couple of hours, but any true position that we have hired utilizing ESSER funds has been included now in this budget draft with the moderate increase for the upcoming year. And then we're starting to review net ed spending and anticipated revenues and tax rates for next year. And so we're looking at how to be strategic in applying those ESSER funded revenues now, even though we're funding them fully with ESSER funds now, so that by fiscal year 24, we have sort of gradually added to our budget, if that's how it turns out, or how we can adjust the budget to kind of absorb some of that as well. But avoiding, again, that any kind of fiscal cliff or large increase that may happen due to the drastic change in revenue when the ESSER funds are dried up. Other than that.
Laura, before you leave that, maybe we ask questions, or do you want to do your whole presentation?
You can ask questions whenever you want, Don.
Well, just, sometimes people like to give the whole presentation, so
I don't have a lot more for this draft, so feel free.
So you talked about the positions. At the next board meeting, is it possible we could go school by school and update the board on, remind us where those positions are, not necessarily the people who hold them, what the positions are, so that 2 years from now, whoever's on the board says, wow, when did that happen? I think sometimes board meetings, we have a lot going on and we hear information and we nod because we know you guys are doing a good job, but.
Sure. And yes, I will share those again. There were no new positions to speak of, there were maybe some shifts or some discussions about using resources differently, but in our discussions this week with principals, there were no true new positions. It was just realizing or talking about or identifying the ESSER funded positions very clearly and how, if we wanted to continue those at least into next year, they're only 1-year contracts, but at least into next year, and then what the thoughts might be after that. So kind of looking in the future. But yes, Dawn, I can put it in a list for you as to what those are. Actually, I think I already have it done when I've shared it in the past. Other than that, like I said, we continue. I mean, every day, Becky and I in the business office continue to review expenses. We're looking at historicals just as we did last year, trying to establish some resemblance of a baseline, which is almost impossible after you merge and then have a pandemic of the nature that we've had. But we continue to try to do that. And so we're reviewing basically line by line historical expenses and looking for efficiencies. We're starting to do that very specifically in facilities lines again. The next step will be for me to sit down with each facility director individually and talk through those needs, look at historical expenses, utility expenses, talk about efficiencies they've gained. We also have an upcoming facility task force meeting with the task force where we'll be looking at short and long-term plans for capital projects and prioritizing those. And then those will be represented in the next draft as well. The only other thing is last time I had neglected to update the snow plowing contracts, new amounts, and we currently have 3-year contracts in all of our schools. If you remember awarding those recently. And so I have now updated those amounts. The budget draft 3 is up slightly. So I don't want you to be overly alarmed by that. When you look at the bottom line, you're seeing a 6.25% increase. But again, not most, but a lot of that increase is reflective of adding in those positions that are currently being funded with ESSER dollars, because in the interest of being transparent and just showing our true expenses as we see them to be or project them to be for next year, I think that's the best strategy. But as we'll talk about in a few minutes, we're offsetting those with revenue 100% this year and 100% next year. But we'll talk about how we're going to be strategic in applying those so that, again, we avoid that funding cliff. But that is a good portion of that percentage increase that you're seeing is due to those additional behavior supports, tutoring, intervention supports that we're implementing right now. I'm not sure if anyone else has questions before I move on.
Laura, I have a question, Toby.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it's necessarily for Laura, but it ties into John, but it's all money related. John mentioned he was working on going out for, the estimates on the equipment for track and field.
Yes.
Before that actually goes forward, will that be brought to the board? Does the board, before the money's this is the estimate, I just want the green light for you guys to punch it.
The plan is that information will be brought to the facility task force first for consideration.
Right.
They would make a recommendation to the full board.
Okay,
I believe.
that's okay. Right, because I'm thinking about the whole capital things, and to be honest, I'm kind of since the discussion, I kind of been thinking should we tie it in with something more grand? And I don't know. I don't know if any of you saw today. They're planning something big at the sports complex at BFA as far as turf. So I know we're not BFA, but I just think, if we're talking about surpluses of money that we've never had before to think about. So I've just been thinking about that. And I do think we owe the track program something, as a board and a community, but I also think let's really think about this. So I want to hurry up and go slow, if that makes sense. But,
isn't that what we do, Toby?
Yeah.
I don't want to speak for people at the facility task force level if board members want to talk, but I can tell you that there are a lot of capital improvements that are being discussed and prioritized, and they range from athletics to grounds to roofing to mechanical to HVAC to plumbing in the floors.
And I've been going to those meetings, so but I think it's good for us to sort of touch on that here at the full board meeting too. So thank you.
That's good, Toby. Glad to hear you, because we spent a lot of time, and thanks to Laura and Julie and we will continue to do that. In my opinion, it's high on our agenda. We just have to have priorities. That's what we keep working on. Then we change them a little bit, then we adjust them, but we still have them. So it's good to see board members ask questions.
Kevin,
I don't know if this probably is for Laura and for the whole group. I was reading the letter today from the Commissioner of Department of Taxes. It was in the news, and I think you guys put it in our drive for us. And there's a specific call in there for school boards to use portions of that revenue for long-term investments in career development and, things of that nature, which is something that we've identified as a goal. And it just immediately got me thinking about the Highgate Airport expansion. Just knowing that we should be expecting new opportunities in our towns in the coming years. And I don't know what industries follow a larger airport or what skills will be in demand and what jobs will be in demand. And I'd like to know, because I think, right now is the time for the development programs like us, the schools, to start putting things in place if we can, so that our kids are ready to capitalize on those opportunities. So I don't know. I just, one thought was maybe the finance committee, Steve and Terry, if you're willing, I'd like to maybe get us together and hear from somebody who could answer those questions for us. I don't know if Tim Smith is the right person or if he could point us in the right place from the, Franklin County Industrial Development Corporation. So just a thought, I don't know. And, I don't know if now is the right time. Maybe it is, if there's something we can implement, for the next budget or for the one after that. But just a thought that I had and wanted to see what the finance committee might think of that.
I think it's a great idea, and I would be happy to meet about that. And I think that we can't get the seller to be the person telling us about it. So we're gonna have to choose wisely who we ask to talk with us. Oh, I don't mean anything against the seller. I just mean we want an unbiased, yeah. So we're gonna have to find, I don't know who we can talk to.
Devin, I think that's a great idea, and I'm going to offer a couple of suggestions to your group if you move forward with it. I think it would be good to contact, I think it was George Hoy, but I think his son is at the airport. And I say that because in the legislature, they came in each year, well, George did, and other people in the state. And I think that to ask them to sit down with you and tell them their plans would help outline that. And the other thing I would suggest you consider is going to the Burlington Tech Center director and see about talking with the people there who have worked closely with the Burlington Airport and developing programs that they've saw that met up with the job needs. And if you need some help with that, let me know. I do have a few connections.
And actually I do too, because my son was a flight instructor down there at that flight school. And my husband works out at has a hangar out at the airport. He flies in and out. So he knows those guys. I can ask George or his son, like you said.
Yeah, I'm all for it too. Can you hear me okay? Okay, good. Yeah, I'm all for it. It's interesting to find out what.
We also have some MVU alumni and former board members who, and I think he lives in Franklin. I don't know if you know who he is. I don't want to name him, but he works in the industry at one of the fastest growing companies in aviation right now in Vermont, and he loves his job. So I would think he would be a great resource too. So
that's a great idea. You mean the electrical plane, that one? I forget the name of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And I think there's a couple MVU grads that are.
Yeah, there's one in attendance at our meeting right now. Mr. Kim works down there too.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Chris, I know Steve wasn't finished speaking, but we lost some of his thoughts.
Go ahead, Steve. Can't hear you.
How about now?
Yep.
Okay. No, it sounds very interesting. So I'd like to be a part of it. I don't know a whole lot about it, and for sure, to learn would be good. So, yeah, count me in.
And Devin, just to add on that, I mean, a lot of what we're talking about with EEI, as far as our facilities, not programming, is space, because we are not, because of that kind of expansion, we're not necessarily thinking that our enrollments are going down like they are in other areas, and they haven't been the last couple of years. So space is also something that we're continuing to evaluate in our buildings. So Devin did reference the commissioner, the Department of Taxes commissioner's letter, which is required to be sent out. And there are numbers that calculations they have to make by based on statute every year by December 1st. So I just thought I did want to let you know that basically those numbers that they're calculating do directly correlate with your tax rate, as all of you know, but for the other people that might be listening, they're forecasting the property dollar yield equivalent, which is one of the big pieces of data that we use to calculate your tax bills, and the income dollar equivalent yield and the non-homestead tax rate. And so if you look at page 2 of that report, there's a couple different scenarios, but overall, they're anticipating the yield to go up, which is a very good thing for tax rates. There's 2 scenarios, one utilizing the $90 million that they're forecasting to be unreserved and unallocated at the state level with the ed fund right now, and how they may apply those. In the tax rate calculations that we've done so far in following Brad James's recommendation, we're using the more conservative scenario, which is scenario B, which is a homestead property yield of $12,937. That's still up very significantly, as I said, from last year, almost $2,000. And so it has a very positive impact to your tax rate. But the Secretary of Education did share a different sentiment today than Brad James from the AOE. And so, you know, it's still very fluid and we have no idea what they're going to do with that $90 million, but there are a lot of people that may be interested in utilizing it. So there's a lot to come in that area. But basically, if scenario B was used in the yield of $12,937, it would be a decrease for taxpayers on an average of 2.5% on their tax bills. If they did apply the full $90 million to offset taxes, this as a kind of a one-time thing, that would decrease tax bills approximately 8.9% for all taxpayers. That's obviously before common level appraisal and all those other items are added in, but just thought that was interesting to share. Speaking about CLAs and property values, as we know, property values have, houses have been selling for way over market value for a while now due to the pandemic. And so that also will have a huge impact on the common level of appraisal. And so we can anticipate that kind of offsetting the positive impact of the yield. And so while we have no control over the CLA at all, and it has to do with property values, it's still a consideration. It's sort of that last factor that comes into play when the tax rates are calculated. So just kind of a heads up about all the things that we're taking into consideration and starting to think about. Just briefly, I did include in the drive an estimated revenue and tax rate calculation for you. That's kind of that one pager that works you through the increases to the budget, applying the revenues, coming up with your net ed spending calculation, and then dividing that by equalized pupil to get your spending per equalized pupil, and then taking into account the yield that we were just speaking about. Right now, our projected expenditures with this draft 3 are up 6.25%. Revenues, as we know them to be right now, we currently have a fund balance from fiscal year 21, that is unaudited. It's just being audited now, so that could potentially change of $1.9 million, but that's what we're utilizing now. We have adjusted the special ed anticipated revenues to the new special ed census block rather than the straight reimbursement kind of model. So we've put that number in. And then we've kind of gone to your question that you had, I think it was at the last meeting, in regards to tuition students and the revenue that we receive. We've estimated that based on historicals and based on current year. We will not have that information till later on, but that's what we've done. And currently we are down about $35,000. So a couple of students there. So we've adjusted that anticipated tuition revenue slightly, but that it could change.
So it's not significant in either direction.
Not significant, no. So projected revenues right now are pretty consistent, about $70,000 positive to the positive. So net ed spending with this, again, draft 3. Oh, sorry, I want to back up. We also did include the estimated ESSER funding. And so that's kind of in the middle of the page on your estimated tax rate page. We're anticipating, as I said, I just want this to be very clear. Right now, those positions are being funded 100%, which is more than this $573,000 you see to offset the tax rate in this calculation. We're trying to be very strategic about how much revenue we apply this year to those expenses. We think it's very important to show all the expenses, but if we don't begin to also represent some of the revenue, then we will have a cliff in our net ed spending at the end of the year if we just all of a sudden add in all the expenses and have no revenue. So we're trying to be very strategic about how we do that over the next 3 years to avoid that funding cliff. So, you know, in our financial software and how we work through it, we'll be charging the federal grants directly. But in your budget draft, we are showing those full expenses and then tapering down the revenues. I hope that makes sense. If anybody has any questions, please let me know. Overall, though, the net ed spending is up about 8.43% with this calculation right now, which is probably higher than we've seen in the last couple of years in draft 3. But when we apply the yield, even the worst case scenario yield at the AOE or the more conservative yield that we're choosing to use from the Agency of Ed, it actually creates a tax rate that goes down by 0.07 cents. We are yet to receive equalized pupil information. By statute, we were supposed to have that on December 1st as well, but we are yet to receive any information on that. So we're kind of, all the business managers are anxiously awaiting that email, but hopefully we'll have that before the next draft comes out. Right now, we're just using the 1,823 number that we were using last year.
Laura, do we have data since we merged so we can track and say the equalized ed spending was such and such 3 years ago? Well, 3 years ago, 2 years ago. So we can see that.
Three years is as far as we go back right now. There's 2 years on this page. 27,829 in the current year, and we're projecting 30,171 for fiscal year 23. But yes, I can put all the last 3 years on a chart if that's helpful.
Only if other people want it. I mean, I have no problem leaving you messages and you're good about getting back to me, but sometimes I just wonder if other board members are having the same questions, but don't ask.
We do usually do that, Don, when we start marketing the budget or right before we're marketing, when we're finalizing, I usually start to share those comps also.
Terry.
Thank you. I have a question, Laura. Do we know what the state has determined our CLAs to be?
No.
Do they have a time deadline when they do that?
They do. Not to say that things are not delayed, haven't been delayed. I can look it up. It's in our budget development timeline. I don't know it off the top of my head.
Oh, yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
I just wonder if they have
it's pretty soon.
Yeah.
Yep. This is crunch time right now for the next couple of weeks before we get to January for sure.
Yeah, because that's gonna.
We were told, and as we know with property values, we were told to anticipate quite a decrease. So we'll see.
The reason I say that, I can see people getting happy because, 10 cents based on what's going around, and then they find out that, oh, my house is worth an extra $100,000, but I'm paying more for taxes too. Yeah.
Laura, I have a question. Have we heard from the state at all if they're going to, I'm just worried in the next 3 months, come out with something indicating if as a result of all the mergers, there's been any drop? Is it too early? I think a lot of Vermonters were sold over the last, when we went through all the mergers, that part of it was cost savings. So I'm curious if the state is going to come out with, and when that would be, because that could be either hurtful or harmful for local efforts as far as getting the word out about a budget too. So no nothing on the radar? They haven't.
I think the Agency of Education is as overwhelmed as our schools are right now, to be honest with you. And I think it's going to be very hard to identify, given the fact, just like we are, where since the merger, we have not had a typical school year. So there is no baseline. There's no history that is a good historical representation of what true cost is right now. We're all reacting to the pandemic or dealing with the repercussions of that. And there are costs associated with that. And the focus has been different than it probably would have been without it. So it's a great question. I wish there was, but I think operationally, MVSD has seen a ton of efficiencies. And I could put them on a list for you, from everything from facilities to curriculum work and all of that, but tying a specific dollar to an amount to it is a little more difficult.
Toby, I'm from the government, trust me.
Okay, any more questions for Laura and the budget draft? Seeing none, thank you, Laura. And we'll move on to the Stephen Hale Trust CD.
And this is just informational for you. Typically, when we have any change in banking accounts or CDs or renewals, I would bring it to the board and I would request approval with different estimates. This was a auto renewal of a CD of the interest only on the Stephen Hale Memorial Fund, which was a Swanton School District trust account that was provided to them. The interest rate was 0.15%. It is extremely low. It's only $7,863 in interest. Last year, we earned $11.94. So I let that auto renew. I did push People's United to give me the best rate possible, and they went up to 0.18. And so I didn't think it was worth a whole lot more of my time than that, to be honest with you. And so I let it auto renew. So I hope no one on the board has a problem with that. If I thought it was any more significant than $11.94, I would have brought it to you. But that has auto renewed, and I wanted to make sure to let you know that that is what happened.
Thank you, Laura. Terry.
I have a question about that, because obviously someone really cared when they set up that trust. And how do we let people know what trust we have? Because I'm not sure you hear about them after a year after the person died or something. It would be a good thing to keep, I don't know, to just.
We have, I would say, control over, Terry, or where we are the ones that solicit donations. Some are not. Some is an existing trust where there's a principal balance and we're only allowed to ever expend the interest. And so they are wonderful, and it's very gracious of these organizations or families to do this. But right now, with the interest rates being so low, or even for the last 10 years, unfortunately, we've been letting them roll and roll and roll until it's enough interest that we can actually do something substantial with it. But they don't necessarily, we don't go to the community for these kinds of accounts and solicit donations. These are existing trust accounts for students. We apply the interest.
Thank you.
Don.
Laura, I'm sure each one is different, but is it possible that some of these, this one is an example where the money could be done to take and purchase something that has some value for the Swanton School and put up a plaque or something for it and eliminate the trust and the paperwork and the $7 a year?
I'm glad you brought that up. I've been talking to RHR Smith, our specific auditor, Miranda, about that over the last couple of years. I wanted, we've done a lot of cleanup, as you know, since we've merged with old accounts and everything, or merging them together so they create a larger yield as far as interest or something. But yes, is it possible? Yes. Is it easy? No. And there's a lot of, as Terry said, this was a wonderful thing and very kind from, a family who wanted to give back to the school district. And so we would never want to go against their original desire either. But I'm starting to talk to the auditors about how we could make that happen or combine some of them so that it could have a larger impact, which was the intent. But it's not necessarily an easy thing. And of course, I would bring that to the board before we ever did that.
Let me tell you why I'm asking this question. One of the things when I was on the MVU board that we talked a lot about was replacing the seats in the auditorium. And we came up with a variety of schemes, from selling ones and all of that kind of stuff, but
Can't hear you, Don. Don, you're muted. Don, you're still muted.
Try it again, Don.
no, I keep
Can't hear you.
getting this message. I got an unstable connection tonight.
Oh, that's why.
It's far too much. Anyway, I think the idea is out there. As I say, the seats in the auditorium has been kind of a priority for the old MVU board. So.
Yep.
And to that regard, Don, I can tell you that Jay Hartman's been gracious in allowing me time to keep bother him also about like small amounts of student activities monies that have been sitting unused, that were raised for a specific purpose, 20 years ago, and trying to pool those together and kind of use those to address some of those kinds of issues as well. So we are looking at those smaller areas, trying to address some of those needs. Not that replacing the seats in the auditorium would be an inexpensive thing, or a small thing, but
You never know.
we're trying to use everything we have.
Someday, maybe 6 months or 8 months from now, if we could put a lot of these things together, what we have, then maybe we can go from there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, any other questions regarding the Stephen Hale Trust? Seeing none, we'll move on to old business. And first up under old business is check warrants.
Steve, did you want to do check warrants tonight? And while you're unmuting, I will just say I did also, it's not an agenda item, but Julie had reminded me to include the COVID-19 financials in the drive this time as well. I haven't done that in about a month or so. And so those COVID-19 related expenses, that reporting is in the drive for you to review. You got it, Steve?
Yeah, I think so. Everybody can hear me. This is my first run through with this Chromebook, and thank you, Robert and Sylvia, for helping me get set up. I did have some hurdles to get through, but I can see all of you. Hope you can all see me and hear me.
Yes.
Laura, thanks for your help on this too. I appreciate that. The check warrants, effective as of the end of November 2021, accounts payable is showing $858,013.23. Payroll checks $66,335.69. Payroll other disbursements $1,758,592.54. Payroll deductions, $584,650.25, bringing the total warrants to $3,267,591.71.
Thank you, Steve. At this time, I'd entertain a motion to accept check warrants as read. Kevin's a first. Terry's a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of accepting check warrants as read, please raise your hand. Motion carries 9-0. Okay, next up under old business is negotiations update. We actually met Tuesday night with the professional staff. It was our first meeting. We nailed down our ground rules. We exchanged our first proposals. We actually are very like-minded in our goals. I felt it went very smooth. I mean, we're not very far into it. We were able to schedule our next rest of our meetings, or at least what we're projecting we're going to need. We met before this meeting as a group just to plan for our next meeting, which is Tuesday. And as far as I was concerned, I felt it went pretty well. I don't know if Joanne or Terry want to add anything, but. Okay.
I would expect, since you have an anticipated executive session for a personnel issue matter, that for any further negotiation update that the board might need, you'd probably have a finding for that around premature public knowledge, putting a party at a substantial disadvantage.
Agreed. Okay.
Should I make that motion, or does that happen later?
Oh, no, that'll happen when we go into executive. Okay, so that concludes old business, and we're on to other business, which is first up under that is a letter of retirement.
Yeah, so I put it in your drive. Oftentimes teachers tell us they're going to retire. Many teachers have, but that's at the end of the year. So we typically share a list of names at the end of the year. But when we have an individual that's going to be retiring mid-year, it involves hiring a long-term substitute, and it's usually the opportunity for the board to, although you don't need to accept a retirement, usually the board wants to make some comment about that individual. This teacher is Greg Carpenter, and he's been at Swanton for quite a long time, and I know he's going to be missed.
For sure, he wrote a lovely retirement letter.
So at this time, I'd entertain a motion to accept Greg Carpenter's retirement letter.
Chris, I've known Greg for years. In fact, he worked on a big project by working with students in the legislature.
He did, yeah.
I'd like to make sure we indicate in there that we accept it with regrets and with sincere congratulations or commendations for his efforts on behalf of our students. Something like that. Toby, were you going to make that motion?
Yeah, that would be that. Don took the words right out of my mouth. I'll make that motion. And Greg, Mr. Carpenter, I should say, was when I first started on the board, I just enjoyed every interaction I had with him. I think he's had a great career for Swanton. And I believe that project you're talking about, Don, was the snowboard, wasn't it? He and Mrs. Belrose.
State sport for skiing and snowboard.
Yes, right.
My knowledge, his students were the only students who have ever come in and used the Senate in an official capacity like they were elected senators.
Yes, I think he and Kristen Belrose, I think, might have spearheaded that. I don't want to be forgetting anyone, but that might have been Mr. Carpenter's. That's what I'll always remember him by. But I only knew him in the past 10 years, but he's been here for a while. So yes, I'll make that motion.
I'd like to second Toby's motion since I worked with him also on that.
Okay, any discussion to go with the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of accepting Greg Carpenter's letter of sorry, Terry. Or were you voting early?
Sorry, I got ahead of myself. Sorry, I was voting early.
No, no worries, that's good. Okay, so all those in favor of accepting the letter of retirement as recommended by Toby and Don, please raise your hand. Motion carries 9-0. Next up, under other business, we have a personnel matter, which would definitely fall under executive session, as premature knowledge may put one or more parties at substantial disadvantage.
Chris, before you go there, I'd like to make a request.
Sure.
Chris, I'd like to request, and if the other board members say no way, but I'd like to request that between our first and second board meetings of January, that we schedule a special board meeting just to go through the budget. And anybody has questions or would like to discuss or address, get them to Laura, Julie. But then we just take the budget. I have a written format, which I really love, but just go through program to program. If there are no questions, fine. But if there are questions or new ads or things, but I just think a budget is such a major task that it deserves a time to, we just come into meet and have a budget discussion. So that's my request. And if the majority says no way, I can live with it.
Rest of the board, how do you feel? Peter?
I certainly support that. It gives the board, I think if we can all go through it together, obviously we're not going to go through it line by line, but we can get all the high points. It gives each board member, and I'm thinking of myself in particular, a much better understanding of the budget if we can concentrate on that for one night instead of just looking at it for 15 minutes in a meeting with Laura. If she's willing, she could go over it for us with, you know, an entire meeting so we can all have a very solid understanding of it. So when the public and people come to us, we have a better answers for them instead of, you know, always telling them, you know, to check with Laura, which I'm probably going to do anyways, but it would be nice to have some knowledge up front as well.
Don, I have a question for you. Just a sec, Joanne. I do have one quick question. You said between the first and second meeting of January, would in January work as well? Or because January is kind of a tricky month, just the way the calendar falls and scheduling meetings. I didn't know if you had like a no later than date. Can't hear you, Don.
The only reason I just suggested in between, if we had it then, and if it was open to the public, which our meetings have to be, there might be some feedback that we would get that if we wait too late and we're going to the printers, we don't get. But my goal is to have a meeting just to focus on budget, and I'll accept whatever time that people want to do it.
Okay. Joanne.
I just want to agree also with John, because personally, I wish I could have had, and I know Laura would have done this for me, but last year being my very first year, I really would have liked just a one-on-one to go through the whole budget. So I would agree.
And we're still happy to do that with you, Joanne. If you want it before this meeting for prep, we will give it to you.
I'm off on the 17th of January.
We do need to have it finalized, but before or by the 20th at the absolute latest.
So I guess my concern would be, let's have it, if we can have it before it's finalized, I think it would be great.
Absolutely. Doesn't do us much good to do it afterwards. We'll just double check with our negotiations meetings as well to see what we can fit in.
Yeah, because we scheduled all of our negotiation meetings on Tuesday nights, so we'll just check all of our dates and we'll figure something out, Don.
Okay. I just think we talk about transparency and engaging the public, and to only have a meeting after we finalize the budget, I think it's kind of hypocritical.
Okay. So
Chris, I still have a question too, and this one's actually more for Laura, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for it.
Laura, how does the audit play into something like this? I mean, are we going to have copies from the auditors, final comments, explanations, or anything like that maybe we should include in the going forward budgets?
Well, the audit draft for fiscal year 20 was finalized, and that was shared with the board, and that's actually in the shared drive as well. Dawn did ask that next year we actually take some time to go through the audit, or at least the finance committee and myself sit down and go through the audit, but there were no findings in the audit from fiscal year 20. They don't really, they look at compliance and regulation and process and procedure and business practice, but they don't necessarily look at spending unless we were in a place where we were running a deficit consistently and we could not provide a reason for that. But that's not the case for MVSD since I've been here, actually.
No, I understand that. I just didn't know if maybe we should pull that factor in too, but I've been through it and I didn't really see anything. And if I had, then I would have talked to you about it right off. But and in my previous board membership, there were some issues before, but I think that's all been cleaned up since. So I didn't know if we wanted to bring it in or not, or if we would just want to move forward. That's fine. That's cool.
If there was a concern, yes, absolutely, we would take that into consideration.
Okay, so next is future agenda items. We're still planning on having a presentation on the SRO.
Yeah, I just want to, I keep leaving that on there so that people know that it's not forgotten, but with the changeover in the chief of police, I wanted to get an opportunity to meet the new chief and then talk about what we'd like the board to hear.
Right. Yeah, we have on your Crossroads after school program, but wasn't that last meeting?
It was, we didn't take it off when we the agenda, my mistake.
That's the one I was talking about, Chris, where they did a really good job. Young lady.
Right.
Nice job.
And any other future agenda items? I mean, I know we're pretty stacked with budget right now, but
We did talk in the later in, we're gonna do proficiency presentation for the board. We talked about doing that as well.
This is not a good night for you guys, for me, but Julie, a question I probably could call you, but last year we added a position for personal learning plans.
Yes, we did.
Are we ever going to hear from that person, or is that inappropriate to hear from that person?
No, I think, you know, in the after budget season, we have things lined up, and by April, we typically have guidance coming in and doing presentation about the data and post-secondary outcomes and things like that. We'll be talking about proficiency and flexible pathways. So having the PLP teacher either present or give the information to administration to present, I think would be really good, because I know Jen is really excited about how that job can grow.
It'd be, from my perspective, it'd be great to have Jen.
Yeah.
we lost you, Don.
Comment was to have Tyler and Jen and the new person in that position come to a board as a team, I think would be really very interesting.
It would be, yes.
Okay, and our next meeting is December 16th at 6:30.
Chris, I think Peter has his hand up.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Peter.
No problem. Chris, we had talked, and I think it might have been Joanne who had talked about student presentations. I didn't know if that had been looked at or thought about for future agendas. Certainly nothing. Is that something that, yeah, just wondering if student presentations is something that we're looking at for the future.
I do know one that we should be expecting, and that would be a portrait of a graduate presentation from students later in the spring, because we want them to present the results of surveys and data to you and what their findings are. But I will talk with the administration about what other student involvement we can have. I think that's a great idea.
Okay, so like I said earlier, our next meeting is December 16th, 6:30. It'll be virtual with a public space like this one was set up. And at this time, I would entertain a motion to go to executive session to further discuss the personal matter and negotiations. And I would motion to invite in Julie.
Can I also invite in Laura and Bonnie because of some of the negotiations, discussions that we want to have?
I was just about to say Laura, but
Oh, Bonnie too, if the board approves of that.
absolutely. So Terry's a first. Peter's a second. All those in favor or any discussion? Seeing none, Don. Oh, he's voting. All those in favor of going into executive session at 8:12, raise your hand. Motion carries 9-0.
Chris, we are signing off here. Julie is now the host.
Okay, thank you.